Welcome to Only Joe, where exploding fish, spy cats, and weird science all somehow fit together. If you told me this episode included killer whales using impact weapons, a CIA bugged cat, and a moon that supposedly rings like a bell, I'd say that's a pretty strong lineup. Also, somewhere in here, a tick might be trying to turn people against steak, which is a sentence I resent on principle. The wildest visual in this whole batch is the new footage of orcas slamming into ocean sunfish so hard, the fish basically explode into chunks. And these aren't even the fish specialist orcas. Researchers say this looks like a newly documented tactic from transient orcas that usually go after seals, which makes it even crazier. A 600-pound sunfish getting pulverized by impact is one of those reminders that the ocean is running a level of violence we barely understand. Then there's the much less cinematic but way more relevant human story about repeated head impacts. The point here is you do not need to get knocked out for damage to stack up. Jamie brings up rugby, soccer, even jet skiing, and trauma surgeon Mark Gordon says repeated stress can accumulate into measurable brain injury. Even body hits and head banging count, and that's why athletes can wind up with memory lapses years later. The APOE4 gene came up too, because carriers may be especially vulnerable, which is the kind of thing that should probably be talked about way more than it is. On the cryptid adjacent side, they swat down the black mountain lion thing pretty hard. The claim sounds cool, but the actual point is simple. No melanistic puma has ever been recorded in the wild or in captivity. Most of the dramatic photos people pass around are jaguars or black leopards, and if you look closely, you can usually see the rosettes. It's a perfect example of how people badly want the rare secret version of an animal, the same instinct that keeps Bigfoot on payroll. The tick conversation gets very ugly very fast because alpha-gal syndrome is one of those conditions that sounds fake until it ruins your burger forever. The link they make is that this meat allergy has surged recently, while it was basically unheard of 30 or 40 years ago. They tie that to a possible engineered Lone Star tick and go after research linked to the World Economic Forum that allegedly aimed at a tick that would push humans away from red meat. Whatever you think of that larger claim, the part that lands is the unintended consequences warning. Messing around with disease vectors and then acting shocked when public health gets weird is not a great system. Speaking of ideas that should have been stopped at the first meeting, the CIA once had Acoustic Kitty, a real program where they implanted a cat with a microphone and transmitter to spy on Soviet diplomats. And reportedly, the mission ended when the cat got hit by a taxi, which is bleak, absurd, and somehow exactly what you'd expect from Cold War gadget brain. That sits next to DARPA cyborg insects, bat-based incendiary concepts, and reports that the Russian Navy trained belugas and dolphins for mine detection and possible weapon use. Humans see an animal and immediately think, can this be surveillance equipment? It's very on-brand and very disturbing. There's also a pretty sharp critique of wildlife science incentives, especially this idea that researchers split one frog population into multiple species over minor geographic differences, because more species can mean more grant attention. The complaint is that taxonomic inflation can dilute conservation priorities instead of helping them. The better metric, they argue, is population growth. Are there actually more frogs alive and doing well, or did we just create more paperwork? And honestly, the phrase frog hotels to help fight chytrid fungus is the kind of public-facing conservation branding I can get behind immediately. Forest brings in the old-school mystery energy with camera trap projects in Papua New Guinea, still trying to catch the last possible thylacine. But the sightings have faded into that familiar pattern where every generation has one uncle who swears he saw something incredible a long time ago. Then there's the documentary about a biologist spending years in the Amazon chasing a living giant sloth, while also realizing that if it doesn't exist, this whole quest could torch his career. That is such a brutal niche science dilemma: follow the obsession or protect your resume. Another uncomfortable unintended consequences story is the claim that mosquito nets funded for malaria prevention got repurposed by villagers for mass fishing. Because the mesh is so fine, the hosts say it wiped out fish larvae and damaged already fragile food systems. The larger point is fair, even if the details are grim. A well-meaning intervention can absolutely backfire when it lands in a real ecosystem with real survival pressures. And finally, the moon rings like a bell thing, which is one of those facts conspiracy culture simply refuses to leave alone. Apollo 12's impact experiment really did produce reverberations for nearly an hour, and that launched the hollow moon crowd into orbit. The scientific explanation is much less dramatic. The moon's dry, rigid rock holds vibrations longer than Earth does because Earth is better at damping them. Still, I get why that fact survives. Say the moon rang for an hour, and suddenly everybody becomes a part-time mystic. That's it for Only Joe. Exploding sunfish, brain hits, spy cats, fake black pumas, and one extremely suspicious tick is a pretty solid tour of human curiosity going slightly off the rails. See you next time. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.